What's going on, guys? Today's video is going to be on Jigsaw Daytradr. We're going to do a little bit of an update on my workspace. I'm going to go over why I have my workspace laid out here because I do have an additional DOM I didn't have before. I'm going to go over how to lay it out, why I have it laid out in the way I do. This is for recording from a live stream. I figure it's more fun to watch the screen moving than doing a video on market close and DOMs just being there. And I actually can pull some data there and explain why I use that third DOM, the Dow Jones, for correlation trades or uh, garnering strength or weakness on it. But I now have 3 DOMs, okay? And if you guys are interested, I can share my template with you so that way all you got to do is plug and play. You can just download my template. I'll email it to you. Leave a comment in the description. Hey, what's the template? I'll send you my email. Send it to you right away. That way you can just open up your Jigsaw workspace and I'll show you how to do that as the intro. So that way, if you do request it, you don't have to manually set up this whole landscape. You can just take my template and you can modify how you want. Some of you guys even had questions about, hey, how'd you get these numbers, right? The delta, essentially, per tick value. How'd you get these numbers here instead of the bars that are normally there? I can share with you my direct DOM display because my preferences on my DOMs, I did modify myself. They are, as you can see, shrunken, so you don't see the full 4 digits on the NASDAQ. Same thing with the Dow and, I'm sorry, ES, Dow, and NASDAQ. So without further ado, just that part of the disclaimer in the beginning. If you just want to get the same template, just shoot me a comment. Whatever it is, you want the DOM, I'll shoot you the DOM. You want the workspace, I'll give you the workspace. Just leave me a comment. But what you'll notice here is I have the S&P futures, Dow futures, and the NASDAQ futures. Now, the reason I have these 3 laid out here is I'm going to lay out a scenario. Maybe it sounds relatable if you trade NASDAQ and ES. But have you ever been in a trade where you are attempting to take a long, say, on the ES? You see that there's a correlation between the NASDAQ and the ES most times. And the ES is not moving, right? Your long ES, say here at 505, and the NASDAQ's just ripping, right? Just ripping, ripping. So you're watching this thing move, and you're like, whoa, 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 what's going on? Why is the ES not moving? What's going on with the ES? It hasn't moved, like, it's only moved 3 points, while the NASDAQ's moved 50, right? There should be a 10 to 5 correlation, meaning the S&P should have moved 10 points, and the NASDAQ should have moved 50. That's the ratio they're in. What's going on? Well, I've noticed that the Dow Jones has a direct correlation as well. So the Dow is just inching lower and lower and lower and lower, while the NASDAQ is ripping, and the ES will probably move a little bit higher, but not much as it normally would. That is the underlying component that was missing. And so for me, in order to have a better risk for my trade in favor of a move that I'm looking for, I've learned to make sure I pay attention to the Dow Jones. Now, to keep things simple, this is a whole other video, but I will watch the Dow, not really on the volume because it's very thinly traded, but really at the pace, right? The pace meaning how much it's moving up or down, right? At what rate, more or less. And this is just eyeballing it. And then also where it is in terms of its volume profile, right? So this volume profile will kind of show you where price has traded and how much has traded within the given session. This is currently the pre-market session on a non-farm payroll day. You can see that the NASDAQ is trading within the top quartile of the highest point it's traded overnight. And the same thing is true with the ES right here. You can see that anything that's grayed out, NASDAQ and ES have not traded these prices, and the Dow Jones is lagging behind, right? It's not even at the tip of its volume profile where the highest price is traded overnight. So when you have that lag, you can kind of discern that, okay, maybe I should not be betting on the ES given the NASDAQ or the Dow Jones is lagging behind. Maybe the better bet for a long trade is the NASDAQ. Since there's no correlation between the Dow and the ES, they have components that overlap, right? They overlap certain stocks, and maybe that'll affect the performance of my long trade. On the ES, maybe I should focus more on the NASDAQ given that it has momentum, it has pace, it's trading within 1 tick value of the high of the current session. Right? That way you can put your money on the betting horse. I say this a lot on my live streams where, man, I took the trade, I like the trade setup. The NASDAQ moved more. ES is moving a little less due to the correlation with the Dow. I didn't put my money on the betting horse. Because, yes, you're going to be right on the directional move, but having these 3 DOMs set up, you can kind of discern which one will have a stronger reward to your risk, meaning if you're betting to the upside or downside, which one will move more in favor. And you can see that based on just the way price is trading on the pace of these DOMs. Sometimes you'll see the NASDAQ is not moving. It's just kind of like pop, fade, and the Nasdaq is just, and the ES is just ripping, and the Dow is ripping. So that means you should, if you're long bias, look for a longs on the ES while the Nasdaq catches up at some point, or maybe it doesn't, right? Or the Nasdaq, the ES is going higher and higher. Dow is kind of like just going trickling or not moving at all, just trading sideways, and the Nasdaq's puking. That should maybe give you some caution that, hey, that long on your ES, it's valid right now, but make sure you keep an eye on that Dow's weakness or strength relative to what's going on with the Nasdaq. All these things come together. Yes, it adds another layer of complexity. But the reason I care about that is I trade for reversals and for a trend move. So if the trend is coming to an end based on these correlations, I should be probably taking profit a little sooner than I would anticipate. Maybe if my profit target's a little higher, 5 points away, I might need to recalibrate that based on what's going on with these two correlating assets. Anyway, that was a long-winded intro. I'm going to go into the DOM setup. So make sure you like the video and subscribe because I will be making on these correlation videos down the road. Before I go into the notes on how to set this up, if you guys just wanted to say, again, just put my template in there. It's very easy. What you would do is you go to, that's the name of my setup. It's really, I don't know. What you would do is if you receive the file, you would click File, open, and then wherever you save the file, in this case it's going to be called this, you can rename it if you need to, but when you download it from my email, what you'll do is you'll download it, save it somewhere you'll remember where it's at, and then in this case it's here wherever it is. Workspace is cool. You'll double click on it and it'll open everything up. Mine's not going to do anything because everything's already open, but essentially this would be the way if you wanted to set that up. You would set it up in that way, and that way when you open it, it'll open up to the same workspace. You can modify from there. So again, open, just click on the file and it'll open everything up for you. Again, it won't do anything for me. And then the same thing applies for the DOMs. The DOMs, if you want the specific DOM layout, essentially you would go to the wrench settings, go to default, and then from here, you would need to make sure you save the default. Mine's going to call it rig DOM. You would need to make sure that you save the file within the workspace. So wherever this is saved, let me explain. That way Jigsaw can read that you have that file there for DOM. So you click on File, Open. Wherever this is, you need to make sure you're saving the DOM file within this space. Otherwise, if you can't figure that out, just watch the rest of the video. I'm going to explain how to set up my DOMs anyway. All right, so on to the next segment. All right, now we have into the actual part of the video where I'm going to show you how I set up my workspace. Essentially, what you'll have is if you use Jigsaw, it will pop up the little doohickey thing. I know they're going to have an update soon, so this will be changing. I'll probably make another video at that point. They're releasing a new update soon. What you'll have to do is essentially if you want to open up a chart, we'll start left to right. That's the way we read here in the US, unless you're in the city. Open up a chart, open up the symbol you want. In this case, I use the S&P futures footprint chart. I don't tinker with the footprint on the NASDAQ. And then what you do is you set up, this will be the first one that opens, at which point you'll now go to footprint up. What I do here personally is I unclick just one thing. I think it's tilt mode, kind of helps you read the footprint a little cleaner. And then as well as adjusting my minimum imbalance volume. 150 to 300 is what I like. That's my personal preference. You can adjust according to trading style. I feel like this throws out less imbalanced numbers. I'll explain what I mean by that. Click apply. When it's okay, there you go. There's your data. The imbalance numbers I'm referring to are these yellow numbers that get thrown out within this little spot. Okay, so the imbalance I'm saying is that the minimum size contracts I want to see is 150 contracts, and they have to be 3 times bigger than the exchanging contract. So if you see, for example, they exchange in this way across the way, right? You get the bid and the ask. So if the number on the right, in this case that's highlighted, it has to be minimum 150 contracts and secondary part 3 times the size of the opposing side on the bid. okay, or vice versa on the ask. As you can see here, this one's highlighted. You can see the 7, okay, to the 350. So that's the only times these numbers will be highlighted. Any other variation that I've messed with, I feel like I get too many yellow numbers and I'm just staring at too much. Okay. If you want to see stacked imbalances or things like that, you may want to tinker with something smaller. Maybe 100 by 200 is a better bet. But this is for my preference and the way I trade, right? Because if you're a person who trades stacked imbalances, imbalances meaning you're getting a stacked amount of tick per value, highlighted numbers, and you want an easy way to read that, then maybe you need a lower, right, to catch momentum. Anyway, when you open this window, you'll have it open. Everything is pretty much there. The only other thing you'll need to set up will be the footprint stats. So we'll go to the wrench here, indicators, footprint stats, add, remove the buy and sell volume. I personally don't think it matters because you're getting the delta anyway. The delta is the difference between the two. You just don't need to read extra data. It's kind of pointless. The total volume is also important to have because it gives you how much volume is being traded as the day goes on. If we're going into a later part of the day and the volume totally traded is remaining consistent and we're having a trend day, kind of somewhat of an indicator for you to understand what's going on there under the hood. Or if it's dwindling down and we're having a trend day, right? And price is slowing down, you're also getting um, lower volume in the lower part of the day, and you're trading at a second standard deviation VWAP band. Wow, those are set up for reversals. Okay, another video, another time, but things like that are the reason I like to keep these things on here because they provide context, right? Everything in the market, especially with information regarding volume, it's all about context. It's not a trade, it's just context. It's a narrative, it's a story. You're putting together a puzzle. Oh my God, I love this stuff. All right, so once you click OK, you'll see that this is your total volume, total V, delta, and then your CD. The CD is something that's more macro, right, from a trend perspective. I don't really use it in my initial analysis. I do look at it kind of as a more of a macro thing as the day's going on or the overnight sessions played out, yada yada. There is one more thing that I have now on my charts. Now, the thing about Jigsaw that I personally don't like, although I'll keep it up as a reference point, I usually like to have it on EOS chart, on my chart, is I do have a VWAP indicator. I don't have the VWAP per se, but I have the deviation bands. We like to have those on here because those are great points of reference for um, having areas to take profit if you're holding a runner or maybe you're just looking to scale out. Those deviation bands are great points of interest to scale out of positions simply because once you get there, the probability of price reversing from there is relatively high. It's not a always reversing point, but it's a good reference point to reduce exposure if you have a good chance. So what I'll do is I don't click the first one. I don't scalp or anything that's on a shorter time frame. So I personally don't find any value in the first deviation band. So I use as a second and third, and I apply those. I don't change the colors, so if you mess with that, by all means. And again, the one thing I will say, I have this one on my footprint charts. You'll see it here on my other chart here. The problem is that it calculates it from a different point than a normal trading chart does, or most softwares do. Most of them do it at the start of electronic trading hours, reading when the overnight session starts. It starts to calculate VWAP from there. Um, and then this one, the one with Jigsaw, for some reason, they only allow or only have the setting to start at midnight. Right at midnight is when the VWAP starts to calculate and the deviations start to come in. Sometimes they line up, sometimes they don't. Still a good reference point to have in conjunction with my other charts that I have. So I do have that on as well. Right, that'll pretty much set up that chart that I have here. And then the DOMs. Now we go into these, and these are all the same. The only difference is how big these columns are. As you can see, I have a very small column here just to kind of fit them all in there. This is going to be my alert column where I write my notes, subscribe, maybe put a smiley face, in case that sounds serious. And then this is my column space here, and I like to write notes because I like to see, okay, where was the last low? Where was the prior row aggressive move from? Where was the open? All these things help me because I'm a reversal trader, so when we start to reverse prices or start to reclaim prior lows, I like to make notes, right? I make my little notes here, and they have all of them line up where they're reversing off prior lows. You have a synergy for reversal. Anyway, alert column. This is where the P&L thing is. I think. And then volume profile, price of the asset, uh, contracts exchange, bid and ask, and then you have the delta print. Okay, that's kind of the order I have them in. I'm going to show you guys how I set that up. So let's open up a new DOM and do that as well. Doohickey here, DOM. Boom, we'll do one for the ES. Make sure you're always in the most recent contract. When you open it up, this is what you get. And again, you don't have to go through all these steps. If you want the templates, just shoot me a comment in the video. I'll give it to you. And then once you do this, you click the wrench for settings, right? And then you set up. What I always like to do is make sure, depending on the asset too, it's very important. And I'll kind of show what I have on the NASDAQ. Most of these are very violent, right? Some of these move a lot more up and down than others, right? In terms of, because they're so thinly traded and volatile. That the auto center, I like to have it on, right? This little auto center section, but I do adjust the auto center to ticks different per asset, and I'll kind of go over each one. All right, and I have to awkwardly add the DOM compression and stuff like that, because if you're manually doing it, I also have compressions on these DOMs set up. So with that being said, I'm going to cover that, put that in awkwardly in this part of the video before I jump into the next section, because I talked about the auto ticks, right? The centering. So in this one is 15 ticks on the S&P auto center. Right? That kind of keeps things kind of level, not moving too much unless we're having a really violent day. And the reason that helps is really because if I try to put it in order or try to take profit or modify an order, if it moves too much, I've done it so many times, I click below price or above price because price is moving so quickly and the auto center is triggering that sometimes my stop loss gets dragged up instead of my take profit, and then it becomes a mess where I close a position I didn't mean to. So very critical to have the correct balance, more or less, for this, unless you use the control panels or hotkeys to take profit. The dial I have 15 as well. That one's a little slower. It moves like a grandpa, really. That doesn't really move too much unless there's news. So I have it on 15, but I do have a compression on this one. So I go to the DOM here, magnifying glass. The tick multiplier is 2, okay? So I do compress it by 2. I feel like that's the best balance for the Dow to kind of give me a cleaner read and not have too much noise or too much movement, right? So if you've ever watched NASDAQ on the DOM, okay, all over the screen, right? It's kind of like hard to catch up with it. We're like, what's going on? So I have 2 tick compression based on my observation. Seems to be the most balanced, best thing to have. The auto center on this one is 40 ticks. I found that that was the best bet. That is about 20 point. Sorry, that is a good amount of points within the rotation that the NQ has, where I'm not really trying to chase the screen and the auto centers for me. So 40 ticks on that one, and I have a compression on this one, and it is for 4 ticks. That means that um, I'm not getting the quarter values on it. I'm getting the full dollar values. It doesn't mean that I get filled at full dollar values when I fill orders. It just means that that's all I have. Okay. So those are the compressions there. On to the next part as well. The things that I remove are going to be the bid and ask profile. This is going to be replaced by the delta column. And then the other things that I remove are the bid and ask. Let's see which order column. Let me check. I forget. It's been a while since I've done this. So here it is. Okay. Order column, bid and ask profile. I don't have that snapshot. Cool. These are the ones I remove, and then I add the delta column. This one here. Boom. And this will provide that little number here, the delta between the contracts exchanged at that specific tick value. So if you're looking for that specifically, this will be the one you'll need to click. I would recommend clicking off profile columns and then adding the bid and ask, the delta. After that, I don't really have anything else. I do have a setting for these to clear the delta all at once, all of them, so that way I get a clean slate whenever I need it. So what I do after that is I go to the shortcut keys. It's another thing I added recently here. And then you're going to see, where is the button? Here, it might be right in front of me. I can't see it.
5 hours later.
All right, so we clear here. Clear delta prices. This is for each individual DOM. What I do is I could clear delta prices for all windows. So if I click on one DOM, it clears on all of them. So what I do is I click on here, change, and then I have, for me, just because it's right next to my mouse is right next to the keyboard on the right side. I think most people's are. and I just click the minus button because on my keyboard, the minus button is right next to my mouse, so it's like I can just my finger to the left like in a second and then just click and it immediately clears all the DOMs. So I do that to make sure I can clear all the deltas for all these things in case I'm looking to get a clean slate because I don't always keep them on. I keep a clean slate when we're getting movements. So that way I can understand where that last high and low is from that current price or last rotation. All right, and then the last thing that I'll do is actually one more thing that I lied about. Forgot to mention on the total, on the bid and ask, the current bid and ask, I do have a clear every bid, and I have it at every 5 seconds. And I click apply, current ask, clear every 5 seconds. And these can vary depending on the volatility of the asset or how much information you need. If you're scalping, maybe a little less would be better or more. You adjust as you need. I like to clear them. That way I get a cleaner read as to the orders that are coming in, the actual pace of the movement, how price is responding to every single level. Because if I have all these orders resting there, I get confused as to where the last how big the move was from say like the 50s if we're trading at 550. How big was the move off of it? Can't really gauge it because I can't see where price went and came from right away. And that's why I have the delta. The delta will not be cleared unless I clear it so I can see where the last high and low rotation was based on the delta print without needing to keep the orders in the middle as they clear and I can actually get a real rhythm of the market. I can feel the actual movement, the actual pace of the DOMs without needing to clear it every so often. I can kind of feel the pulse of it because it's clearing as it's moving. So I'm looking at price moving from price to price. And I'm not really getting this noise in the middle. I'm just looking at the actual rhythm, the actual beat of every pulse of every single tick value or price that I like, while still having the data of where was the last high, where was the last low, how much contracts exchanged at this level and at this level based on the delta print, right? If you're going to have, let's say on the NASDAQ, a 200 delta, that's pretty high. That's not really normal for most price levels. Once it hits a 200 delta, whether positive or negative, that's pretty noteworthy. You are not going to see that on the DOM anyway. So that's why I leave the delta print on here and why I remove everything in the middle so that way I can actually gather the rhythm. That's going to be it for the DOMs, really. It's really simple. I don't have much else. I hope that helps. I don't use the heat map, but if you wanted to open heat map, you would essentially click on the DOM you want, click on this little charty chart, and then it should load up a heat map. You can adjust from there. I know that's something people use a lot lately. I know it's probably valuable for scalping and other things. You can adjust depending on how much you need. Go from there. I might make a video on that down the road, how to use it. I personally don't use it, so I won't know its true value, but I can at least set it up and kind of work settings that might work for best to read it because you do need to fine tune it here within these settings. All right, and that pretty much concludes the video. I don't really have much else to share. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and kind of how I lay out my template. Again, if you want to just request it, I'll send it to you and I'll save you some time. Make sure you guys like and subscribe the video. And then if you guys have any other questions regarding the platform, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to make a video on it or maybe shoot you an email and explain how to do so. I do have another video on on Jigsaw, kind of reviewing it in general. This is more just of a template video that I'm making pretty quick and easy for anyone who has questions on how to set this up.